Okay, that sounds
Great,
fun.
and so here we are at the end of a successful session of our collaboration between Media Lab and law.MIT.edu, Berklee College of Music, and our
Open Music Initiative.
and our friendly collaboration, the Open Music Initiative.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so this day of the computational law course was very much focused on Open Music Initiative challenges and trying to get a conversation together and a dialogue that could surface the right kind of content for a specification that could achieve the goals of Open Music Initiative, yeah?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I approach teaching kind of like a jazz drummer or something, right? I don't want to go into it with too much preparation because I've been preparing for it all my life, and so preparation will kill it for me. What I try to do is to get the right people in the room, right? And so I want Ron Carter on bass, you know, and so my Ron Carter here was certainly, you know, Red Bull, and IBM was John Coltrane, and you get to be, you know, Horace Silver or something. But also we had this just amazing group of people whom I've already, you know, made this weird bond with who I'd never met before, who self-selected and came here and were willing to listen to a bunch of my nonsense and a bunch of really smart things from other people and talk and share and we've left. For me, this worked because it was the right people in the room, and it was one of the best OMI related events where for the first time, most importantly, yes, you should take a little bow, but also having artists really begin this and kick it off, and they need to be acknowledged from the very beginning. Post House, what's that?
Post House Tuomi.
Yeah, Post House Tuomi, these two guys in Finland who Skyped in and talked about their experience as working musicians and their journey and their inefficiencies and challenges they have to deal with, all the while succeeding, starting it off that way from the artist standpoint and exposing that to people with disparate and divergent sort of backgrounds so they can go, yeah, the music industry really is kind of screwed up. How can this still be? And then sort of reverse engineering it, putting through this filter of, you know, legal, computational, whatever, you
Business,
know.
legal, technical.
Yeah, BLT. And then coming to this place where it seems like for the first time we've got all the right people, all the right addressable problems. IBM just completely blew my mind, not just with the presentation, but finally talking about things like the caretakers and the, you know, finding ways to validate things and talking about a blockchain that actually does have scalability to do this. So unbelievably exciting if that's not obvious.
Here. Okay,
Yeah.
so in that spirit, what we'd like to do by way of wrap is first just highlight what happened and what's on the board, so it may have some more meaning and context
Sure.
for OMI and
Sure.
others in your community, and
Mhm.
people like me can just remember it. And then we'll thank everybody here. So to start with, actually, I think the right way to start is, TMA, we're going to have you in the beginning and the end, but tell us what the purpose is. You documented the purpose, and then just go chase her, Brian. Thanks. What was the purpose?
So we had a couple purposes. Resolving inefficiencies in how artists get paid, empowering artists to take rights back, and creating a movement, providing more transparency in the industry, maintaining incentives for business owners, reducing litigation, and sharing revenue streams across all platforms and ecosystems for the artists. And this was brainstormed by the entire class, so thank you guys.
Here. Thanks, Tammy. Now, come on over here. So some things that happened after this even higher level statement of purpose along the lines of if this is done well, artists can have what sustainable career can make.
You know, I mean, the goal, my little purpose in life, because I'm a big believer in purpose, not product, right? Too often, companies, individuals, the world gets sort of product centric, and I believe that money and impact and all those are byproducts of some greater purpose. So my purpose as a human, and certainly teaching as a byproduct of that, is to help artists create sustainable careers on their own terms.
Yeah, so we wrote down, and get a close shot, sustainable careers on their own terms. And own terms is so poignant for the legal dimension of all this. So some of what we tried to do is capture along the way at least a few potential functional requirements and design requirements stated in a way that it's kind of agnostic to the technology or the specific solution, to see if we can trace them back to the goals and the objectives, so we can align that with the purpose. So one that kind of came up was that the people on the buy side of the market, the buyers, the licensors, could easily discover and identify the works, and this came up later with the identification issues and some other stuff. So being able to do that is huge. whatever the system would be that could be built and used to achieve these ends would allow for a marketplace or an ecology of kind of apps and services that can run on top of it. You know, sort of like that Sabre example. Sabre's a good example for several of these things. At the B2C level, the kind of consumer level, we think a feature of a solution would be, it's not so much a functional requirement, but maybe a success metric would be, we'd expect that they wouldn't be paying more. Like the big idea isn't, oh, we'll charge more for them. They might even pay less or not more anyway. But distinguishes in the B2B model, there may be some other buyers, institutional or other buyers that may pay more, and they may be thankful for that because it's such a higher quality service and it gets more what they want. And another kind of design goal that came up was on the legal dimension of this, there's going to be a need to be able to really master the contracts and the licenses to support and reflect the underlying law, and also to advance the types of roles and relationships and deal terms that you anticipate. Some of that is just to go back to school and correctly model and track to the legal rules and requirements, such as, and you're up next, the composition versus recording rights, and derived from Section 106 of the Copyright Act. So a big part of what happened today was just mapping those, and George is the right person to say that.
Yeah. So, as I said, when I did this, it should just be tattooed on my back, it'd be easier, but you can't really solve for anything in the music business unless you have a real clarity of understanding of the individualized components of a song. Unlike other copyright, songs typically start with two separate and distinct copyrights. The copyright for the composition, which is owned and controlled by the songwriter or the publisher, and the copyright for the sound recording, which is owned or controlled by the label or the performer, each of which have a set of rights, exclusive rights, on both sides that they can control. And then the outlier in the United States Copyright Code, which is a big problem, is this no enumerated right for sound recording and public performance, which has led to, among other things, issues around black box money, and just has been a big bugaboo of the music business. But by understanding this, then you can understand things like ISRC, ISWC, identifiers, and the money flow. And if you don't understand it, it's a non-starter. So where do you want to go from here?
Okay, come on over here and let's see the next thing. So I think back to TMA. And TMA, could you please just highlight for us? It looks like we have some role separation, and we started to break this down from the business, legal, and technical dimensions for each of these roles. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so we identified 3 different roles, but focused on the 2 main ones, which is Red Bull. And Red Bull's business purpose is to license music and to promote their artists, and also make sure that that the money that they end up paying to other entities doesn't get lost in a black box and not end up going back to the artists who created them. On the legal side, the issues that we identified were consent decrees, forced by the government. Yeah, forced by the government. And then monopolies that exist in the industry. And then on the tech side, we had identified bad metadata, lack of universal identifiers for artists, a breakage between the ISRC and the ISWC. And then from the tech side, also from the blockchain perspective, is blockchain scalable? Are smart contracts actually sufficient to solve this problem? And what kind of standards and interoperabilities are required? And then we also identified from the societal standpoint, what is the value of art and the environmental impact of all of this? So then we moved on to what the artists require. So on the business standpoint, sustainability, artists need some sort of revenue, affirmation of the art that they've created, and also tapping into the community and increasing connection, and then creating an identity. On the legal side, issues with contracts, legal entities, accounting, identity, which breaks down into authorization, delegation, and assignability. And on the tech side, how do we solve the difficulties with agreeing between publishing rights? And then this ended up actually leading us to realize that we needed a third role, which is of caretakers, some sort of group of people to kind of step in if we're going to use blockchain as a solution, which I think Peter is going to go a little bit more into.
Yeah, and I might just do a little color on what we've got to so far today, which is actually a big win, I think, for George and OMI. was we know that there's a box here where we can identify the name of a role at some point, and we have a placeholder that after some back and forth isn't bad, but I didn't put it in the box because that's a political step when it's caretakers. So there's a role here, some kind of steward, some kind of something that's this overarching, and you allocate functions to roles, and so we identified some of the key functions of this type of governance role, including, well, actually I won't go into that because there's some other dynamics of this type of role as well, and that's where you came in and helped us get over the hump of that conceptually.
Right, so if we were to implement actually some real network, some blockchain-based network which would realize the solution, we would have to, based on understanding of the domain, identify a few organizations which would participate in the network, which means that they would have some physical peers which would be participating in the network, store the ledger and store the data, and participate in recording of the new transactions. Which means that we would have to develop some new smart contract which would implement the functionality. At the same time, there are some issues which are related to performance. So as we expand the scale of the network, as it will take longer to store the transactions into the ledger, and we have some other issues with integrating the existing systems. And the most important aspect of that is how the wallets which are managed by those existing systems today would be integrated into the overall solution.
Yes, thank you so much. And an important point is, these are just some things that were identified. They're hardly complete, but we do think these are relevant and they're good candidates of things to keep in mind and pass forward. And so some of the functions of the role of this kind of network provider might include identifying the criteria for establishing whether a given transaction is considered valid or not. That's a perfect kind of governance role. And then I just have to say from direct experience, including some kind of agreed processes for iterating that criteria over time,
Sure,
and iterating the technical implementation over time, and iterating who's in and who's out over time.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So that's some of the functions you'd expect, and maybe even identifying or selecting the approved wallet provider or the criteria for any wallet provider that meets these standards or kind of functional requirements can provide a wallet in the system. So those are some of the examples. So with that, this video and then some just pictures of the whiteboards and some notes that fellow legal hackers and the core team from the computational law course have taken, we have already wrapped up we'll put this in the GitHub repo for you, and we hope that this will be something that further enhances our collaboration and the goals of OMI. And I just want to thank you again for being a great collaborator.
You too, man. Thank you.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you, Ron.
Thanks.